Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today to the first edition of With Wonder webinars for 2026. Today, we have a big topic that we would love to discuss. I mean, it's something that's close to my heart as being a founder. And it's all around leadership and how to lead with intent and connecting with your team for their ability to also lead with intent. Introducing our special guest today, George Kiorpelidis. He is the founder and head honcho at GKBC Leadership. He helps entrepreneurs and business owners grow their companies and become leaders in their own right. He's got 20 years of experience in industries from all over the place, including technology, aerospace, pharmaceutical, real estate. And he also hosts a podcast, Lead Like a Boss, which is a great podcast to follow. Welcome, George. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thanks, Mohamed. Great to be here. And honcho, I like that. I think I'm going to change my business card. Honcho, head honcho.
My last guest referred to themselves as Overlord. So,
nice, nice. All right, maybe we should get him on a call.
Right.
Fits right into our topic today.
Exactly. I get the head honchos and the overlords dueling it out. Yeah. So today's topic is growing an organization. Every organization out there, if as a startup founder or a small to as you're going through the motions, has a bit of a problem in that the figurehead, the founder, becomes a bit of a bottleneck after a while. It's as the leader, you were the original decision maker, problem solver. But as things grow, accountability needs to be shifted over to the team. And if you don't really work that out very well, it becomes a bit of an issue. In your experience, George, how do you work with leaders to have that sense of trust within their team to be able to offload that leadership skill? How do you imbibe that leadership into your team members?
It's a great question, and I often get that: are leaders born, or or can you train leaders? Can you make leaders? Are they made, or are they born? And it's a silly question because no one is born anything. You're almost a clean slate. It's your environment that gives you those skills. So if your parents had that leadership mindset, if your parents were saying, well, Johnny, what do you want to do? Or, we can do this or we can do that. Which would you prefer to do? Well, Johnny's going to develop, critical thinking. Johnny's going to develop that mindset of like, okay, I need to actually use my mind to create my choices. Or if it's always Johnny do this, Johnny do that, Johnny do this, Johnny do that, Johnny will never learn how to do those things. And it's the same in business. So the idea is to change your mindset from do this, do that, do this, do that, to empowering the team to learn how to think critically and come up with their own decisions. And most entrepreneurial leaders, they're really good at what they do, but they never learned anything about management tactics, management skills, how to motivate a team. So that's usually where where the gaps lie, usually where the friction starts.
Absolutely. I mean, every business owner that I've known has fallen in that trap where you've done something or have been the know-how behind everything for so long that sometimes you fall into that trap of, I'll just do it myself because it's quicker, as opposed to offloading that and going through the initial pains of teaching someone how to do something and then being able to let go and being able to delegate and let their their expertise also come out. Into the conversation.
And so in one of my podcasts, I had Christina Gantz on as a guest, and we talked about that extensively. The idea that it does take time, it does take effort, it does take a process to create that leadership mindset, to teach people how to learn. So that's that, you can, if you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, you teach a man how to fish, you feed them for a lifetime. But there's that gap of time to teach them how to fish that a lot of entrepreneurs feel they don't have. But that's a mistake, because statistics show us that the turnover issue, getting new people, recruiting new people, training new people, getting them to the point where you get a positive ROI is very, very costly. And when people don't feel that they have that ability to lead themselves, they get frustrated and then they look for another job. And so there's the ROI. It's muddled, it's fuzzy, it's hard to identify, but that's where the ROI comes from when creating that leadership capacity in your people, like in the moment.
So what do you tell, or how do you work through that process with a business leader, a founder? How do you work with them for them to be able to break those habits?
Right. Excellent question. So first is the basic tactics. You need to create that time and you need to create that space to do it. Famous leaders like Jack Welch, they are famous for saying 75% of my time I spend not managing the business, but managing my leaders. I just focus on the leaders. And if the leaders do their job well, everything else is taken care of. So blocking out that time, so a lot of leaders, especially in mid-sized businesses, they're time stressed. So making sure they block out that time to do that leadership. I'll give you an example. I had one client, very big firm. They had a pool of up and coming partners. And one of the targeted partners was in an office just across the aisle from the founding partner. That person had worked there for almost 2 years. They never had lunch together.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, dedicating that time to spend the time with the people that you want to turn into leaders, so important. So blocking out the time and then having a leadership mentality. So instead of telling people do this, do that, you got to ask questions. What do you think we should do? What do you think would be the best way of handling this? And then, of course, giving them the freedom to actually do it, make mistakes, do the debrief, learn from them, and move on. But having a framework to do that is something that a lot of leaders don't have. They don't have that process to do it.
It's the process and the time. And for a lot of founders and business owners who are on that growth scale or that growth trajectory, and those are two fundamental things that are very hard to come by. Time is one, and then obviously where you get the process from.
Right.
These are the types of things that if, let's say, you come from an engineering background and you got an engineering based startup and you're developing something, your thing like the back of your hand. Getting that new process and that new learnings, where do you seek that from, and how do you instill it within yourself? How do you find the time, one, to learn, and then find the time to implement if you're running a business?
Right. So good, perfect. So when you started your business, you didn't work an 8-hour day. I mean, how many founders have I worked with over the years? They had a day job and then they spent their non 9 to 5 hours hustling their grind and getting their startup off the ground. It never ends, brother. It never ends. You're 9 to 5. You're doing the work of getting the widgets out the door, and then from 6 to 9, you're working on those other skills to make you a better leader. And if you're not willing to dedicate that time to do it, it's not going to change. It's not going to happen by itself. And if you want to speed up that process, then there are courses that you can take. You can take courses in schools. You could take courses, paid courses. You can hire a coach. I mean, there are a lot of ways to do it. But if you don't invest the time, you don't build the time, make the time, invest it, it won't get better by itself. You can't listen to one of these webinars and figure it out. You can't read one book and figure it out. It's something that takes a long time. But having a framework really matters. If you look at companies like not LinkedIn, Netflix, they have a management process. They train their managers. This is how you attack a problem. This is how you deal with a conflict. This is how you manage a project. And they have guidelines for them to follow so that their managers have a process to use in order to move things along. So having a common framework that everybody knows is very, very helpful. It's like a military. It's like working for large organizations. They just have a way of doing things, and creating that way of doing things is important for entrepreneurs.
Yeah. Then there's the daily task management and following up on tasks and becoming that micromanaging something. Did you do this? How'd this go? All of that jazz. The idea here, I guess, is to move away from that and to really move over to outcomes. What was the outcome of this? How did that go? What's the conversation that you've had with clients? What's the pushback from founders who really want to make sure that everything is to their,
It's funny. I was talking to a client just this morning and I was saying that forget the process, because they were just stuck in process. How do we do this? And I was like, shelve that for a second and focus on what's the outcome we're looking for. And not enough people are taking time to really drill down into the outcome because they're so stuck in process. They're so stuck in the nitty gritty of execution, because that's where most leaders are good from. They come from the execution part. So they're really focused on getting the execution right instead of working on what's the problem, identifying the problem, putting metrics around it. Because then when you have that, then you can hand it off to somebody. But if you don't have it, it becomes emotional. It becomes I feel it's working well. But as you hinted, if you have metrics, then you don't have to rely on your emotions so much. Now you can rely on the data. So it's like math. You know, when you were a kid, you know, you had this long equation to get the solution, or you can have a small equation and still solve the problem.
Yeah.
But you got to really know the problem well before you can come up with a new equation to solve it. And not enough people are spending time really understanding deeply what the problem is. And if you do that with your team, they will get more adept at identifying outcomes and then coming up with solutions for them. You know, start with the end in mind. That's kind of the idea.
Yeah, I read something the other week, which I'm going to butcher the quote in itself, but it was something along the lines of, you know, spend 90% of the time thinking of the problem as opposed and 10% on the solution. Because if you don't really understand the problem, you're not really solving for anything. You're just hacking away at something.
That's Albert Einstein.
Was it? All right.
Well, I mean, I'm sure every knowledgeable person has come up with something similar to that. Yeah. But it's like the quote that's attributed to Abraham Lincoln. You know, if I had an hour to chop down a tree, I'd spend 45 minutes sharpening the axe. You know, it's the same kind of idea.
Yeah, for sure. Just for our guests, we're going to have a couple of minutes at the end of this for any questions. So if you got any to throw out George or myself, please keep them in mind. And there is a little chat box in there you can throw them out in. And saying that, talking about bigger picture, the impact of this, you know, looking instead of really looking at the short-term results, how do you get to the bigger picture? Because you as a CEO or business owner, whatever it is, also need to think pie in the sky. You need to think moonshot. You need to think bigger picture, direction, navigation. Where are you going? But how do you communicate that to the team so that even if you've got the big problem, right? How do you work together to break down the problem so you can work on the solution? And how do you communicate that effectively so that everybody knows what to do and everybody's got accountability and a guiding North Star?
I think most organizations, the big picture thing is very well established. You know, the owner comes out with the beginning of the year. I mean, a lot of them probably went out in the last few weeks. You know, this year we're going to do this, and this year we're going to do that, and we're going to tackle this, and we're going to improve that, or we're going to launch this. And so the big thing is pretty well established. People know how to announce the big thing. Where things get bogged down is, do I know how to manage my day? Do I know how to prioritize the time I have in the day? Do I know how to manage and prioritize my week? Do I know how to manage and prioritize my month? So that at the end of the quarter, I've gotten closer to the overall goal. That's where a lot of people fall down, because most people say, George, improve sales. Sales are down. Improve sales. Well, that's not a goal. Like, that's not smart, right? It's not measurable. It's not attainable. Like, it's too vague. So by breaking it down, breaking the big goal down into really, really micro small tasks and KPIs, which a lot of people hate, that you can measure, helps to move the ball down the field. And it takes a lot of work and effort to build those. But once you do it, it's repeatable. So you got to invest a lot of time in the front end to build them. But then once you've got them, they save you time down the road.
Yeah.
Go back to the first problem. If you're time stressed, you don't take the time to make those. And then you go back to the make sales happen, or you know, lower the costs of shipping, or you know, buy that software. We need a new software. Just get it in here. Or we need a new body in that role. Like, just hire somebody. And so that is where things tend to the wheels fall off the bus.
Now, if you're thinking of any of these frameworks or these processes, there's a lot of acronyms that get thrown around. You got OKRs, you got SMART. You know, where do you lead people into? How do you get them through that first hurdle in a way that doesn't seem overwhelming or give you that pushback of, I don't have the time, I don't have the resources, what am I going to do? It's too much right now. We can't do this right now. We got a big project coming in and we're launching, and all of the excuses to not do something and bury your head in the sand. You know what I mean?
So it's not as simple as it sounds. And there's a lot of data that shows that it's easier to take a startup and grow them in that space than it is to take a culture that's already well established and fix it. I mean, a lot of companies have been blown up because of that. Like they say, this is too broken. We got to blow it up and start all over again. Now, obviously, that's not an option for most businesses. But to answer your question, when I go into an organization, I don't say, this is my acronym, this is my thing. I mean, even though I've got BOSS, it's my acronym, it's more of a marketing thing. I go in and I don't become a victim of what I've been telling you. I take the time to do the analysis. I take the time to really identify what the problems are, prioritize them, figure out which is the low-hanging fruit that can really move the needle. Like, don't try to fix everything. Fix that thing that's happening right now, and then go from there to build it out and go after like the foundational problems. So it's kind of triage, stop the bleeding. And then once the patient is stable, work on their diet and exercise and all those things that will get them on the road to health. So I don't get hung up on systems. I don't get hung up on programs. I don't say, oh, you got to follow this 12-step program, blah, 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 because, in those 12 steps, there might be 2 that they need and the other 10 they don't need.
Yeah. You mentioned to me before that you had a diagnostic, you usually offer a 30-minute strategy call. I'm going to put the link in here, but maybe you can tell us a little bit about how you go about that.
Right. So this goes to what I was saying before, diagnostic. So I'd use a bunch of diagnostic tools depending on what the challenge is. So if it's a leadership challenge, I don't know how to lead my teams. So, we can do a leadership. If it's a sales problem, my sales team aren't executing. Okay, well, there's an assessment for that. If it's marketing, my marketing is messed up. Well, there's an assessment for that. So depending on what the challenge is, we do an assessment that finds where the bleeding is, to use the previous analogy, and then we attack that problem. I think the one that I've got in this link is more of a general business type of analysis. So it goes over everything from your finance to your marketing to your HR practices. And then it gives us kind of an overview of what's going on with the company. But I do leave spaces for people to kind of freeform answer questions that are more general. And then I take that and I feed it to an AI tool that I've been developing over the years. It has tons of different types of methodologies and tactics. And then it kind of matches the problem to a various different tactics, and then I go over that with the person who did the assessment, and then it gives them a few ideas of how they can tackle the problem, and they can take that and run with it, or we can continue to work with them to help them to put things in place to improve those issues in their companies.
Amazing. I've got a question here from Elizabeth. I'm gonna throw it out there. How do you resist the urge to jump in when you see someone making a mistake you could easily fix? Is there a trick to becoming more comfortable with being hands off? That's a great one.
Great question. And it goes to what I was saying before. Don't wait until there's a fire before you teach people how to use these systems. Because if you wait till there's a fire, then that's exactly what people are going to do. They're going to jump into solve it mode rather than into train mode. Of course, if there's actually a fire and things are actually burning, that's not where you sit down and say, well, Johnny, what do you think is the right way to handle this, while the building's burning down? So of course, you got to use your judgment. But most of the time, that's not the case. So that's to resist the urge is to do it in advance. So that means when you onboard somebody in your company, you tell them, this is how we handle problems. So when you come to me, like Sloan, right, from General Motors, he said, you don't come to me with a problem unless you have 3 suggestions for an answer. So you train them up front that you don't come to me with a problem, Johnny. You come to me with, this was the challenge. These are 3 ideas I have for fixing it. Help me, brainstorm which is the best solution. If you train them up front before there's a fire, then when the fire, first of all, you'll have less fires if you do it properly. So that's good.
Yes.
Second, if you do that repeatedly, you'll have the reflex to not jump in and solve the problem you'll have the reflex to fall back on your process, just like they do in the military. They do all that rehearsal, all that training, so that when the bullets start flying, they revert to their training rather than their reflex.
I love that also because you're setting them up to always be thinking of solutions as opposed to relying on you as the business owner or the chief problem solver, to always, you're taking away that crutch.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'll tell you, these days, you look at any of the big business books, big business, all the research is saying that a lot of the management models that we developed were developed like in the 30s and 40s, like post-World War II thinking. We're talking about people that are coming out of university armed with ChatGPT and all these LLMs. You cannot treat them the way you treated people that barely had a high school education and just knew how to do their job. You've got to teach them. You've got to treat them like they are thinking, capable people. I think it's Simon Sinek says, if you're not the dumbest person in the room in your company, you're hiring the wrong people. You need to be hiring people that are better, smarter than you are at their thing, and give them the freedom to do it. And that's what a lot of entrepreneurs fall down on.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the next question is, okay, go ahead.
I was going to say, tell me about the podcast. You've got a podcast, Lead Like a Boss. What kind of topics do you cover there? Obviously, it's within the realm of this conversation, but what kind of guests do you talk to? A little bit about that. What's going on?
So we're going into season 3, and apologies to all of you who are waiting for your episodes to come out. We're doing a lot of post-production stuff, so there's that. But it's season 3, and so BOSS quickly is bravery, optimism, security, and sustainability. That's what BOSS stands for. And the reason why I created it was because I saw a lot of business training, a lot of business information was aimed and always talking about the big companies, the usual big players, the Microsofts, the Teslas, all the big names in the news type of thing. And it's not really the kind of information that someone who's running like a $5 or $10 million business, owner operator type of business, that information is not very applicable to them. So I created the BOSS podcast to basically tell the stories of entrepreneurs like yourself. You were a guest. And it breaks down the problems that they had to solve to grow their business, the practical problems. Like, how do I delegate? How do I hire a number 2? How do I let go of all these controls, levers of control, and let other people do them? How did I get financing? How did I get partners? What kind of marketing techniques did I use? Like the real nitty-gritty stuff that got them from struggling to make payroll to actually having money to grow. So it tells their practical stories.
Yeah, no, that's great because one of the biggest things is that a lot of people look up to the Apples and the IBMs and the General Motors and those big companies that have an insane machine and longevity. They didn't get to where they are right now yesterday. Apple's been around for going on 50 years now. There's upheaval in the early days and almost going bankrupt in the 90s. But people think of it as what it is right now and try to emulate that instead of looking at where they were. But talking to small business owners or medium-sized businesses in terms of their struggles and where they've been and where they want to go and how they're trying to go through that, I think is very valuable for a lot of entrepreneurs in general and startup founders as well.
Mohamed, I'll tell you, I don't know how many times I get I was resisting the urge to turn everything into systems and processes and templates and KPIs. I was resisting it because I don't want to micromanage and I don't want to tell my people what to do, blah, 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 blah. But then when they finally made the switch and started to do that, like this look of relief comes over their face. It's like, oh, I can breathe. And now everybody knows where they're going and everyone's got a plan. Yeah. So making that transition is very tough, but when you make it, it's a game changer.
Absolutely. We are getting to time. If people want to connect with George, connect with George on LinkedIn, and I guess they can find details of your podcast right there.
Yeah,
and,
the podcast is on YouTube. So you can look it up on YouTube. It's now on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, so you can find it there as well. But yeah, LinkedIn is a great place to reach out to me, and we'll connect. I mean, do the survey. It takes 20 minutes, and it can't hurt. It costs you nothing, and you may learn something.
Amazing. All right. It was a pleasure to have you. This has been an insightful talk. I'm hoping everybody's found a lot of value in this. And if they reach out to you, definitely take that survey and learn a bit about how to manage your team. Obviously, we will be sending out the recap of this video to everybody that's joined the call. And yeah.
Thanks for having me
This has
on.
been amazing.
I look forward to maybe doing it again in the near future.
Absolutely. Would love to have you back. And thank you, everybody. And yeah, we'll see you in the next one.